Hello dear viewer and friend, you might notice something a bit different about this video. I have a new lens for this camera and oh my god, it looks so much better. I'm watching myself in my monitor here and it just looks so much better. I'm just very excited. Anyway, it's great to have you here, and in this video I'm going to talk about some Criterion Collection titles that I want to recommend to you. Because here in the UK we've got a new sale going on. We have a 2 for £25 sale on at a number of retailers, including HMV, Zavvi, Zoom, probably some others that I'm forgetting about as well. But it's such a steal getting Criterion titles for the equivalent of £12.50 each. So I have a stack of 10 films that I'm going to show you now, and I hope you can take these recommendations and maybe discover something new. Maybe one of these films will be your new favourite. All of these Criterion releases that I'm about to talk about are UK releases because the sale is going on with UK retailers. But if you're outside of the UK, you might be able to import from some of these websites. I'm not too sure. You might need to check that. But if you're in the US anyway, they're available in the US catalogue. The first film that I want to recommend to my friends is Only Angels Have Wings. This is a film directed by Howard Hawks, starring Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. And I love this film for many reasons. But one of the things that I'm going to say is maybe the best thing about this film is there's a particular sequence of aerial photography, so of this plane flying over the desert. And for the 1930s, this is incredible. The reason I want to point out this release in particular, though, is because there are some great features on the disc talking about some of Howard Hawks' works with aerial photography. There's also a conversation between Howard Hawks and Peter Bogdanovich, who is a great filmmaker in his own right. And then there's also a conversation with David Thompson, who, if you don't know David Thompson, he's a great film critic and a great film scholar, and I've read so many books written by David Thompson. So for that reason, and for the film itself, I love this release, and I think it's one well worth giving a chance when it's at £12.50. So sweet. The next film I want to recommend is Diabolique from Henri-Georges Clouzot. I've talked about this film on the channel before. Me and Dad did a podcast episode on it, which you can find on this channel, where we delve into this film and the themes and everything about this. It's such a good, tight thriller from the 50s of French cinema. If you're not familiar with Clouzot, his films are highly suspenseful, highly thrilling. He made films like Wages of Fear, for example. You may have heard of that. Many people compare Clouzot to Hitchcock. He has a lot of the same, maybe stylistic touches to his films. You know, the suspense in particular. Hitchcock was a master of suspense, but Clouzot was also a fellow master of suspense, and you see this in spades in Diabolique. The reason I recommend this release in particular, a few reasons actually. There's some great special features. There's an audio commentary on selected scenes from a French film scholar, Kelly Conway, which is very fascinating. And there's also a good discussion with Kim Newman, who I've mentioned on this channel before. Kim Newman is a great film critic and film scholar, and he does a lot of the special features on the Masters of Cinema releases, which I greatly admire. So I always love hearing his thoughts on films, and his conversation on this disc is great. So for all of those reasons, for my love of this film in general, I recommend this film. If you've not seen it, if it's not been on your radar, just do a blind buy. You know I love blind buys. Well, this should be one of yours. So that's Diabolique. The next film I want to recommend is Cat People. And Cat People is an early horror film from 1942, but it was so revolutionary in many ways. In particular, it had one of the first examples of a jump scare in horror. Something I find funny about the history of Cat People is that it was made by RKO Studios at the time, and they made this to recover from a financial flop that they had the year before. And that financial flop was Citizen Kane. So this film was made to kind of rescue the studio from the financial demise of Citizen Kane, which is pretty funny when you consider that it's now thought of as one of the greatest films of all time. Again, I'm recommending this release because of the special features. There's a great audio commentary on here. There's a great documentary about Val Lewton and about all the films he produced over the years. And there's also a great interview with Jacques Tourneur, who is the director of the film. And Tourneur is a great director in his own right and made so many good films. So it's a fascinating release, and I totally recommend this. I would also like to recommend Dreams from Akira Kurosawa. And this is one of his late films from 1990. So he was at the end of his career by this point, but he still made so many masterpieces late in his career. I'm one of those people, and I've said this before elsewhere, that I actually prefer Kurosawa's late career to what he was doing in the middle of his career when he made films like Seven Samurai and Rashomon. I think those films are incredible, but I much prefer the works like Dreams and Ran and Kagemusha that he made during the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I have a soft spot for Dreams. It's a beautiful, colourful film about these vignettes, these dream sequences that apparently Kurosawa had. One of these dream sequences is particularly interesting because it's about Vincent van Gogh and painting, and it uses special effects to bring the paintings of Van Gogh into the film. And also Van Gogh is played by Martin Scorsese. So yeah, it's worth seeing just for that. The reason I recommend this release in particular, first off, it looks tremendous. It's the best this film has ever looked and probably will ever look. The special features though are so good again. There's a feature-length documentary about the making of the film that is actually longer than the film itself. And that is directed by none other than Nobuhiko Obayashi, who is the director of House, the great iconic cult film from Japanese cinema in the 1970s. So that is just another fascinating tidbit behind this release. The other special feature that I want to particularly point out that I think is worth getting this release for is a documentary from one of Kurosawa's longtime translators, Catherine Cadu. She goes behind the scenes and she interviews so many other filmmakers like Bernardo Bertolucci and Alejandro Iñárritu, Martin Scorsese, and they all talk about their interactions with Kurosawa's films and why they think he's so special. So again, another fantastic feature and a reason to get this particular disc. Another one to get is It Happened One Night. This is from Frank Capra. It's a screwball comedy starring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, and it's one of my favourite films of all time. This will always be on my top list. It's old, it's from the 30s, but it stands the test of time. It is a classic screwball comedy. It's two people, they get flung together, and there are sparks there, there's chemistry, but they both don't get on. And we know that in the end, you know, they're going to get together. But it's just fun seeing the journey along the way. And it's very funny, very well directed, and it looks great as well. It's a great looking film. The standout feature on this release, and the reason I want to recommend it to you guys, is there's a feature-length documentary about Frank Capra's career and his life, and it's so good. If you want to learn more about Capra and the classic Hollywood cinema that he created, this is a release to get, so I totally recommend this one. Oh, we are getting there. I'm sweating so much though. It is so hot right now. But anyway, if you're enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing to this channel. I'm going to be making lots more videos about the Criterion Collection and classic cinema, things like that. So if you're into that kind of thing, get involved in the comments and stick around on the channel. Anyway, back to these recommendations. This next film is one that is a big titan of world cinema and often seems inaccessible to me, but I keep coming back to it for more. The film is Stalker from Andrei Tarkovsky. You've probably heard about Stalker. It's often quoted as one of the most important films of all time, one of the greatest films. And I can't really talk that well about it. I'm so ill-equipped to talk about this film. All I can say is it's one of those films that you actually have to just watch and experience. On the surface, it's a science fiction film based on the book from the Strugatsky brothers, but really that's not doing it justice because it is so much more than that. If you've seen any of Tarkovsky's works, you know that he was such a poetic filmmaker, a very deep thinker about metaphysical things and about life and all sorts. There's all sorts that could be read into in this film. This release in particular has some great special features. There's an interview with Jeff Dyer. Now, Jeff Dyer is a bit of a scholar when it comes to Tarkovsky and Stalker in particular. He's written a book called Zona about Stalker. So yeah, just hearing his thoughts on what this film is, what this film means, what it means to him, very fascinating. So it makes this release well worth having. There are also a number of interviews with the filmmakers that worked with Tarkovsky, which are invaluable. They're really great. So this is a release that I think should be on everyone's shelf. If you're a Criterion collector, you need this one in your collection. And getting it in this 2 for £25 deal, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, get Stalker. I'm also going to recommend Desert Hearts. This is a film that I was introduced to recently. I mean, I bought it ages ago, but you know how it happens. You know, we have a film that's on the shelf for ages and we're like, is this the right time to watch this? But yeah, I just did it. During this lockdown period, I decided, no, I have to watch Desert Hearts finally. And I loved this film. Ostensibly, it's a period piece set in 1950s America about these two women who grow feelings for each other, and it's an exploration of sexuality in a time when it was much less accepted than it is now. It's shot by the great DOP Robert Elswit as well, who is a great cinematographer who's shot many films I love, including some with Paul Thomas Anderson, like There Will Be Blood. So the film, in terms of visuals, looks amazing. Reasons for getting this release beyond the film itself? Well, there's a great audio commentary with the director, Donna Deitch, and there's also a fascinating interview or a conversation between Deitch and the actress Jane Lynch. It's a fascinating conversation, and I love Jane Lynch. She's always so magnetic when she's on screen. Any fans of Glee will know how good Jane Lynch is. All around, it's a great release, and this film was only introduced to me through the Criterion Collection. So it's one of those gems that wouldn't be a part of my life if it weren't for Criterion. So that is why I'm such a super fan of Criterion and blind buying films. It's been so good for me so far, so I'm going to keep going. Number 8 on this list is such an easy one, an absolute doozy for you to get. It's Tanpopo, and you've heard me talk about Tanpopo on this channel before. I know many people that tune into this channel love Tanpopo already. Just give it a shot. How to describe Tanpopo? Well, it's very quirky, and it's a western about ramen noodle making. So yeah, just let that one sink in. And it goes off into so many random places, but it's all tied together. And this film will change how you think about eggs. I'll just say that. The reason to get this, again, it's the special features. There's a great making of documentary that goes into the behind the scenes of the film for an hour and a half. So that's fascinating. And it's one of my favourite cult films, and I try to get everyone to watch this. So if you've not seen Tanpopo, if you've not heard of it, well, I hadn't before Criterion, but again, it's just one of those films that is now such a big part of my film journey, and I love it so much, so hopefully you can too. Next, I'm going to recommend Death in Venice. This is a film from Luchino Visconti, who was one of the great Italian filmmakers, making such great films like Rocco and His Brothers and The Leopard and Conversation Piece and so many others. But Death in Venice is one of his later works, and this is such a complex film. It's not complex in the same way that Tarkovsky's Stalker is complex. It's the fact that it deals with certain subject matter which could be viewed in a certain way, in a very, negative way, but in actual fact it's saying much more about the human experience. It's about this composer who's, later on in his career and his life, and he comes to Venice for a bit of respite, a bit of solace, to reflect on life and maybe to get some inspiration. And he finds this inspiration, this beauty of life in this young boy, this strange boy. And he becomes infatuated and obsessed with this young boy. The reason it's such a complex film, and one that some people have particular issue with, is that, you know, it could be looked at in almost like a paedophilic, predatory way. I definitely don't agree with that critique. I think it is a film that is about finding beauty in life, no matter where you find it. And it's very clear in my mind because the film never crosses a line. And there's obviously a certain line, and that line is never crossed. So yeah, very complex film, and one that you should watch because I think it's challenging. It challenges preconceptions, challenges maybe what you would see and instantly judge as something, and you find out, well, it's much more complex. The reason I recommend the release, there's some great special features, in particular a documentary about Visconti's life, looking at his whole career and interviewing people that he worked with, such as Burt Lancaster, who was in The Leopard and Conversation Piece, and yeah. So it's a great special feature, and yeah, a fascinating release, so one I would recommend. And lastly on this list is Kiss Me Deadly. This is the great film noir from Robert Aldrich. It's full of expressionism, brilliant directing and storytelling. It's very bleak, as you'd expect film noirs to be, almost nihilistic. And it's a film that's a great inspiration for many filmmakers. In particular, Alex Cox and Quentin Tarantino. There's the particular, you know, shining light in a box that they use in their films that is taken from this. I mentioned Alex Cox, the director of Repo Man and Sid and Nancy, not just because of the inspiration this film had on his career, but because there's actually a feature with Alex Cox on here. And it's not quite a video interview or a discussion. It's quite weird. It's almost like a diary entry that he's doing, and it describes it as a video tribute from Alex Cox. So I love hearing him talk about films. He used to host the Movie Drome television program where he would introduce these weird and sometimes quirky films. So I love hearing him talk about films. So that's one of the reasons. And there's a great audio commentary with James Ursini. So a great release, one of the brilliant film noirs that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. So Kiss Me Deadly is the last of my recommendations for you to get in this Criterion sale. So there you have it. Those have been my recommendations. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Of course, there are so many other great Criterions that are in this sale. If you want any more recommendations for these, just, you know, hit me up in the comments below or get in touch with me on Instagram. I'm more than happy to give you further recommendations if you want them. I will be back for more videos very soon, but if you want to stick around on the channel, I have many other videos giving film recommendations and talking about boutique Blu-rays and the Criterion Collection. You can click whatever video is about to appear over my face right now, so that'll keep you busy. And until my next video, stay well and healthy and keep watching great films.